in the life of an institution when you get to welcome a distinguished public servant and a great servant for the great state of New York, and that is the Honorable Kathy Hochul. Let me tell you a little bit about our distinguished Lieutenant Governor. She became politically active long before she was an elected official, when during her years as a student at Syracuse University, she led a boycott of the student bookstore over its high prices. And having been a student activist myself, Lieutenant Governor, I was very captivated by that. That's a real bread and butter issue for students, the cost of books. She also led, although unsuccessful at Syracuse, an effort to name the stadium after Ernie Davis, who is a distinguished, one of the best running backs ever to play collegiate football. She thought it was more appropriate for Syracuse to name its stadium after Ernie Davis than the Carrier Corporation. Now, she will remind us that she was unsuccessful, but anybody who takes on that type of task has chutzpah, as we say here in Brooklyn. She received her BA degree from Syracuse and then went on to law school and earned her law degree from the Columbus School of Law at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. She began her career in public service as a legal counsel and legislative assistant to two members of the Congress, one, United States Representative John LaFalce, and the legendary senior senator from the state of New York then, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And she credits former Senator Moynihan with being one of her significant life mentors, and what a giant of the Senate he was, and his contributions to the nation in New York are well known. Lieutenant Governor Hochul is a proud native of Buffalo and was elected to the Congress from Buffalo in 2014, and the 26th District, where she was one of the passionate advocates for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as the Obamacare. She firmly believed that it was in the best interest of the United States to finally join the rest of the world in making sure that we were doing everything possible to extend health insurance to as many Americans as possible. It really was a profile in courage because her district was a tough district who didn't necessarily subscribe to that view. But our Lieutenant Governor held strong and voted for the bill and was very supportive of its efforts to get implemented as well. Now, nowadays, as our distinguished Lieutenant Governor, she chairs 10 regional economic development councils that have transformed the state's economy, building upon the strengths of each region of this great state and stimulating thoughtful approaches to strategic planning to grow the economy of New York State. Governor Cuomo also appointed her to chair a task force on heroin and the opioid abuse problem in the state. Needless to say, as healthcare professionals, we're very concerned about opioid addiction and the number of members of Brooklyn who present to us and to other healthcare facilities with that problem. And so in this capacity, she's convened 8 outreach sessions across New York State to hear from all the experts, but not only just the experts, it's from the families and the community members who are searching for answers to address the heroin and opioid crisis in a comprehensive, compassionate manner. Lieutenant Governor Hochul also spearheaded Governor Cuomo's Enough is Enough campaign to combat sexual assault on our college campuses, and beginning in 2015 has hosted over 40 events to date to raise awareness about sexual assault on college campuses. As the highest-ranking woman elected official in New York State, she continues to be a champion for women and children and families. In 2016, Governor Cuomo named her to New York State's Women's Suffrage 100th Anniversary Celebration Commission, and she was elected chair of that group. She has the honor of representing Governor Cuomo across the state and has visited all of the 62 counties in the great state of New York at least twice, logging nearly 100,000 miles, enough to circle the globe 4 times. Lieutenant Governor Hochul tours Main Street, meets local business owners, visits colleges and campuses and universities, meets with small-town mayors, big-town mayors, supervisors, and other community leaders because she cares deeply about government as a force for good in our state. And beside her political work, she has been an active member in her hometown of Hamburg, where she is a founder and a member of the board of directors of the Kathleen Mary House, named after her mother, a transitional home for women and children who are victims of domestic abuse. She was also the co-founder of the Village Action Coalition and a member of the board of trustees of her high school alma mater, Immaculata Academy. Lieutenant Governor joins us, colleagues from Downstate and community today, on behalf of the governor of this great state of New York, Andrew M. Cuomo, to present the state of the state and where we are as a state, to talk about our challenges, our strengths, but more importantly, the bright future that the great state of New York has, notwithstanding the macro issues of the day. So colleagues and friends, please join me in a high honor to introduce the distinguished Lieutenant Governor of the great state of New York, Kathy Hochul.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. It is fabulous to be here back in Brooklyn. First of all, my staff has this habit of calculating how many times I go to different parts of the state, and I think this will be approaching our 60th visit in Brooklyn. But I have to say it's kind of unfair because Downstate Medical has occupied, it seems like, about half of those visits. We have been here many times at your invitation, and not the least of which was a really special event in December of 15 when we were joined with Dr. Eve Kramer, who the audience thought she was a rock star, and I believe the same, when we opened up the biotechnology incubator. And I just had the privilege of touring it and seeing firsthand what success looks like. And so I want to commend Dr. Kramer, who's joined us today, and all your partners over there for using the brilliance of the people associated with this institution. And Dr. Riley, I know you're sort of new to this, maybe 8 or 10 months you've been here, but already your leadership is bearing fruit for all of us. And I will someday forgive the fact that you hired one of my top staffers to be your head of government relations, Jelani Deshong, Brooklyn resident. And my chief of staff, Jeff Lewis, also lives in Brooklyn. And my chief scheduler, Sinead's a Brooklyn resident too? Okay, all right. Please don't tell the other boroughs all my staff lives in Brooklyn, okay? All right, just cover me up on that one, all right? But there's something special about this community, and again, that tour just a few hours or an hour ago reminded me of the spectacular innovations and how smart people are at this institution. And I believe almost half of the physicians practicing in Brooklyn are graduates of here. And so it's one of the largest employers, almost 5,000 people work for you here in Brooklyn. You are, yes, a healthcare provider, you're an educator, but you're also an economic engine that we do not take for granted. And so we're so grateful to have this institution as a close working partner with us in state government to deliver services to the people of this borough. And that is a huge point of pride for myself, and I'm really, really happy to be back here. And thank you for hosting us this event. The governor gave his State of the State address last week. Dr. Riley was there. I think it was clocked in at about 90 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do better than that. 110, no. I'm a little competitive. I will come in and I'm a fast talking upstater from Buffalo, New York, and the doctor and I were just sharing our experiences of growing up in Buffalo, spending some time there. But I appreciate your time and your willingness as leaders of our community to sit in this audience and get sort of a 10,000-foot view of where we've come from, the challenges we face, and how we will meet them. Because we're New Yorkers. We say bring it on. We say bring it on. And in my lifetime of public service, and I'm sorry you had to sit through such a long bio, I'll tighten it up a little bit, but you did a great job. But I will make one correction. We've actually driven around the planet 7 times. So we got to update my, it's not 4 times, we've now been around the planet 7 times. But I have been in public service since, even before my college activism. I helped work for a race for the first woman to run for lieutenant governor in 1974. Yes, I'm that old. I was a high school student. But I have been involved in this process either as an elected official, member of Congress, county official, local official, most of my life. I have never seen such an assault from our nation's capital on the people of the state of New York and other communities, and that is why this State of the State address is perhaps one of the most important in our lifetime to talk about how we are going to have to fight back. Something we did not have to worry about during the previous Democratic and Republican administrations. We did not worry about this. Programs like CHIPS were always funded. These were nonpartisan issues. We didn't find ways to throw young people out of our country, okay? We are in a different environment today, and it's incumbent upon all of us as New Yorkers, who the rest of the nation look to for leadership, to say, this is the path. And so I'm going to take a little bit of your time tonight, but hopefully as leaders of your community and people who obviously care enough to show up here tonight to become more informed, I hope you help us spread the word and use your voices and advocacy to join with the governor and myself to fight back what's going on and continue to make sure that New York State remains a beacon of progress for our people. I will start clicking very quickly here. Let's see how this works. Hey, it works. That's me. Okay. Okay. This is going to test my old eyes. I have to look to the back of the room. New York State has made remarkable economic and social progress. We've achieved more. We've passed more meaningful legislation. That's a beautiful picture of our Senate, where I'm privileged to preside as the president of the Senate. But we have passed major legislation. I'll talk about that in a minute. We've built more for the people. But let me just give you a little context. When the governor first took office in January of 2011, if anybody wants a bad flashback, that was a tough time in our country. Subprime mortgage crisis. People were losing their homes. Unemployment was through the roof. Young people were fleeing the state of New York. Businesses were leaving because our taxes were too high. And we inherited a high tax reputation that was well deserved. But the governor said job number 1 is to get our spending under control, and he says we can do that. And so in contrast to his predecessors, including his father, he's proud of the fact that we've been able to keep state spending under control, which in turn allows us to address that reputation of being too high tax and allowed us to reduce taxes. So if you can see this, we have reduced taxes for corporations, manufacturing, and middle-class families, the lowest they've been in many of our lifetimes. But while we're getting our fiscal house in order, at the same time, we've not shirked our responsibility to continue investing in infrastructure. And that is why what you see here is this gleaming former Tappan Zee Bridge, Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, which is the largest infrastructure project in America today. The governor was told it can't be done. People tried for decades. It was too big, it was too audacious. But those are exactly the kind of projects that we embrace in New York. We built this great city, and we've not had projects and scale of this in a long time, and we finally are having. This will be open very shortly. Anybody spend time on LaGuardia Airport? Okay, yeah. Holy smokes, I'm there every week. I was so happy to drive by again today, and when you see the frame, the steel going up, it's hope. The talk is over, we're getting it done. And we all know how we felt when Vice President Biden said, if you had a blindfold on and you were dropped off in LaGuardia and they took it off, you would swear you were in a third world country. Okay, that nicked our New York pride a little bit. The governor didn't take it that way, though. He said, Mr. Vice President, you're absolutely right, and we're going to fix that. So LaGuardia is going to be spectacular. JFK, giving them a whole new lease on life, hotels, a place where so many people from around the globe land in our international terminal and hopefully don't get wet from a water main break. It's a little rough week. But this is people's first impression of America. We have to make it spectacular, and we will. The new Moynihan Hall at Penn. Anybody spend time in Penn Station and you live to talk about it? That's good. That's good. I always worry when I drop my daughter off there and like the 7 levels of hell. I hope I see her again. But I mean, look how glimmering and spectacular this is. I mean, I'm not kidding, right? The Javits Center. Yes, it was amazing in its time, but we've been surpassed by other cities, and we had to step it up and add another 1 million feet. Anybody commuting in from Long Island, God bless you. I mean, this has been tough, and this is, again, a huge undertaking, but we're going to transform this. The K Bridge, I was there the night we lit it up. I love seeing that, and I come here often, but I also live really close to the Peace Bridge in Buffalo, and that connects Buffalo to Fort Erie, and we light it up as well. I mean, we're lighting it up for, sports teams and Women's History Month. We light it up purple, we light it up pink. I mean, there's always, it's just part of civic pride, and the governor tapped into that sense. Why not show off our buildings in a majestic way and our infrastructure? Cashless tolling to try and alleviate headaches. $1.4 billion in vital Brooklyn. There's a lot of other boroughs and communities who'd like $1.4 billion in front of their name, but you have it here in Brooklyn. This, if you've got any farms in downtown Brooklyn, I'm not sure you do. I've been to some on rooftops, but just so you know, this is going to transform communities in upstate New York, because there's 25,000 legal uses of hemp. And everybody's been a little afraid about hemp and what it's all about, but you know what? There's commercialization opportunities that can unleash new opportunities for farmers across the state, and the commercialization and the opportunities for businesses here in Brooklyn to take advantage of that. I'm going to briefly explain what REDC means, Regional Economic Development Council. In the bad old days, the way economic development projects and dollars were delivered from Albany was basically based on your political clout. Whose representative had the chairmanship of a committee, or was head of the assembly, or head of the Senate. And the money went to those districts without regard to the rest of the state or communities that were still in need. I'm from Buffalo. I know what benign neglect feels like, okay? That has been the history of much of our state. So the governor said, let's change it. Let's have each of the 10 regions of our state have their own council, spearheaded by someone from academia, someone from business, and on the committee have people from business, labor, not-for-profits, elected, and regular people who will decide and chart their own destiny. That's what we've done with these councils. We've had over $5.4 billion invested into 66,000 projects. And that's how this happened. I cut 6,000 ribbons. No, I'm just kidding. But you think about it, 6,000 projects just since the governor's been elected. I mean, all sorts of scale, but it's transformative. One thing we've also done is a downtown revitalization initiative, which we've been successful in infusing $10 million into downtowns. And overall, and just this is our quick look backwards, our strategy is working. First of all, what metric we're going to look at? Jobs. 8.1 million private sector jobs, the highest number we've ever had in our history. Unemployment. And I will tell you, in Brooklyn, the unemployment rate is 4.1%. Who would have thought you'd see that in our lifetime? I mean, I was studying economics at Syracuse University, and 4% was full employment. And this is unbelievable. It creates new challenges, which we'll get to, but that's a lot better than having 8, 9, 10% unemployment. We're making huge progress here. Unemployment's down all over the state. So I've laid out an economic strategy, a fiscal strategy to keep our house in order, our infrastructure strategy. But on the other side, we have to continue to maintain our position as the leader in social progress for the rest of the nation. We have earned that. going back to 1848 when the women's rights movement started in our state. And if you want a nice summer trip, I recommend you go up to Seneca Falls, stop at a couple of the wineries while you're there. I can make recommendations. But this is where the women's rights movement started in our state. That's part of our DNA. The environmental movement started in New York State. The labor rights movement started after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in New York City. Gay rights movement started at Stonewall. The civil rights movement was furthered by the Underground Railroad and Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, who are buried in upstate New York, Sojourner Truth, others. These are the people whose shoulders we stand on as New Yorkers. And so the governor and I recognize this legacy that's come down to us requires us to continue moving our state forward as a leader to others. And that's what we're going to continue to do. That is why we were the largest state a few years ago to adopt marriage equality. Paid family leave, you should be proud as a New Yorker that you live in the state that has the most generous paid family leave program, period. And I'm going to tell you, I was there during the battles. This was not an easy lift. There's a lot of other people who did not want this policy in place. But the governor and our local officials fought for this. Your representatives in the Assembly and the Senate fought for this. And what does this mean? This is not just for people who just adopted a new baby or have a new baby at home or little kids. This covers the spectrum of life. This is also about people being able to be with their elderly parents or grandparents and take them to a doctor's visit or visit them at the nursing home or give them the care they need, or like I did with my mother a few years ago, hold their hands as they take their last breath without fear of losing your job or your income. That's what a civilized society should offer its citizens, and that's what we do here in the state of New York. Minimum wage. New York City. How does someone work 40 hours a week under the previous minimum wage and still be considered under the poverty line? That's just fundamentally unfair. We recognize this. We are a leader in the nation. It is at 13% in the city now. It's going to be going up to 15%. And this is going to allow people the dignity of being home a larger paycheck so they don't have to come home and then go back out to the job again at night. And this is also investing in our future of our young people to give them better paying jobs as well. The Excelsior Scholarship, if you're familiar with this, and I know you are, yes you are, this is a game changer. I was with the governor and Hillary Clinton over at LaGuardia Community College, and we signed into law, the first in the nation, a commitment by our state government and our people to say, yes, we believe in you so much in your future that we will make sure that key to opportunity is unlocked for you, and that is what we call a free tuition to a SUNY or CUNY school. And that is something that has transformative possibilities, and I'll just tick them off. This is not just good for the young person. It's an investment in them, yes, but also their families, parents, a lot of them single family households. A lot of time it's the mother sitting there looking at the faces of a few kids, bunch of kids. How are they going to give them this opportunity? We're going to open those doors, but also as an economic development strategy, and this is what gets my attention as well. When I'm trying to work with the governor and our team to lure businesses from all over this country to come to our state, and I can say that you come here and your workforce will be the most highly educated in the nation, that's a no-brainer. They will come here. And so investing in them as individuals and their families is also an investment in our state's economy. That's why this is so significant and has been successful. Raise the age. I'm talking about some of the successes of last year. We and North Carolina, we do not want to be lumped within a whole lot of categories, I'm telling you right now. Not exactly my idea of a bastion of social progress. Only 2 states in the nation that treated 16 and 17-year-olds as adults with respect to the criminal justice system. We woke up and said, that's wrong. That's now changed, and we're doing the right thing. Climate change. How did you all feel when you heard that your federal government said we will walk away from our commitment to the planet? Boo, yeah, it was a bad day. not just for us, but for future generations. And so the governor says, okay, federal government, you do your thing. We're New York. We're going to team up with California, Oregon, Washington, and others and say, we will still honor the terms of the Paris Agreement. And that's what leadership looks like. So in the state of New York, you should be proud of that. A lot of people don't think about water infrastructure, okay? But when all of a sudden your water for your kids is not clean and pure when you turn on the faucet, we've got a problem. And it's a lot easier for elected officials to ignore this problem because you really don't see it. It's not like putting up a shimmering new building. But if you don't invest in this, you are abrogating your responsibility as elected officials to your people. That's how important clean water is. We are continuing to commit $2.5 billion. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to guess that that's more than the entire federal government is spending nationwide. We're doing it here in New York because we are in New York. Those are some of the commitments we've made. I want to go through where we're going next because we don't rest on our laurels. We don't rest on our laurels. We've accomplished what I just spoke about, but here's some of the challenges that we are undertaking this year. We'll continue investing in our economic development strategy because it's working, another $750 million toward these councils. But I'm telling you, as sure as I'm standing here, don't take this for granted because there are a lot of forces, politicians who want to go back to the old way. We have to resist that and say this way is working. We also recognize that something I hear when I visit businesses all over, and I've been to many, many, many businesses here in Brooklyn at the Navy Yard and the Army Yard and all the exciting places where new development is occurring. Businesses are no longer complaining about the taxes, which is good. They're complaining that their number one challenge is finding workers with the skills they need. We can help them out with that. We're investing $175 million, creating an office that's going to dissect the needs of our employers and make sure that people have the precise skills that they're looking for in each of the regions. That kind of strategy is going to help us, again, with our national competitiveness. We'll continue providing assistance to downtowns, continue our investment in infrastructure, broadband. I gotta tell you, I travel the state. Broadband, high-speed broadband is like air. If you have it, you just sort of breathe it. You don't think about it. It's always there. If you don't have it, you're gasping. And I see that in too many places in New York State where people have to drive their kids to the library parking lot at night hoping to pick up a signal so their kids can get their homework done or apply to a college or apply to a job. We are committing the state of New York to have 99.9% full coverage by the end of this year for everyone to enjoy this infrastructure of the 21st century. And why is that important? Back to my argument, our national competitiveness as well. Yes, it's good for families, individuals, businesses, but when I'm trying to recruit businesses here, and I can tell them no matter where you go, you'll have access to high-speed broadband, again, it gives us an advantage. We talk about investing in our middle class. We talked about the Excelsior program. We talked about other ways we can help them. It also includes continuing tax cuts for them, which are going to continue to rise. Okay, I mentioned Washington in this slide. There's a nice picture of the nation's capital. This one's tough. 30 years ago, I was this young idealistic attorney on the staff of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. That is the last time we had comprehensive tax reform. And back then you could call what we did reform. You can't today. The process, which should have been going on, was what I saw at that time. A year and a half of hearings, expert witnesses coming, listening to people on both sides. We talked about a lot of the abuses. We eliminated the 3-martini lunch deduction. We said some of these are not fair, but we had a solid system that was in place for 3 decades. That's how you create bipartisan consensus. And it was statesmanship. I saw that. That's what I expected when I went back to Congress. Haven't seen that in a while. So you talk about what we got. The tax bill that was enacted by our Congress is nothing short of a frontal assault on states like New York. Because despite the fact that it has been a fundamental premise since the beginning of our tax code, our federal tax code in 1917, where there was an agreement and an understanding that you don't double tax people, you don't tax them on taxes they've already paid, the people in Washington said, oh, well, that mostly affects blue states. We don't care. We'll eliminate that deduction. And who cares? And it's embarrassing to know that there were 4 actually New York State members of Congress who went along with that plan to hurt their own constituents. That is another story. So what do we have? We have a problem, but we're rising to the challenge. And the governor says there's a couple of different ways. One is we're going to challenge the constitutionality of this. We're working with Eric Schneiderman to find a legal argument to undo this. But in the meantime, we have people in the state of New York who we work hard to reduce their taxes and get them to stay here, and businesses to come here and stay here. And all of a sudden, you pull the rug out from everybody, and all of a sudden their taxes are higher because they can no longer take this deduction. We are trying to find creative ways, and the answer has not been found yet, but I assure you it is being worked on. A creative way to allow people to continue deducting this value so they do not end up with a higher tax burden. Because again, ladies and gentlemen, this is a competitive environment. We cannot let New York State lose this, and the governor is leading the fight. I spoke about some of our criminal justice reforms we've already had. We still have a long way to go. And one of the most powerful moments in the governor's state address last week was when he talked about a young man who had been arrested for the crime of stealing a backpack and spent 3 years of his life in Rikers jail, and as a result of what he endured, took his life. That young man's brother was in the audience, and the governor said, never again. Because what happened there was if that same person had lived in the suburbs and stole a backpack and mom and dad came down to jail and posted bail, he never would have spent the rest of his teenage years imprisoned, not convicted of a crime. Okay? That cuts to your very soul of what is right and just, and that was not an example. I will tell you right now, we are going to change that. And we are going to say, yes, we understand that our number one responsibility as elected officials is to protect our people. Yes, we will not let people who will cause harm out in the streets. But in cases of misdemeanors and nonviolent crimes, why can't someone have the opportunity to be out on bail, continuing to work and go to school, when they're accused of something someone else would be able to get away with because they can post bail? So we are going to change that. The governor says we're going to change the bail system, and I'm very excited to see that some of the district attorneys in the boroughs here are already making those changes. But also, why is it taking so long anyhow? Why is our criminal justice grind to a halt? Why would it take 3 years for that young man's case to get there, or 3 years or longer? So we're going to speed up, have speedier trials, the discovery process. We're going to do what it takes to get that right. I mentioned the pride in being the home of women's rights movement here, and we began this past year, 2017, honoring the legacy of the early suffragettes. I mean, it was an exciting time. I took the message all over the state, but I was always feeling maybe we didn't quite measure up, okay? Because I think about how we're honoring how brave and audacious these people were at the time, 100 years ago, and what they accomplished, going against society and challenging the status quo. And yet, 100 years from now, when they look at all of us, what are they going to say we did? How do we measure up? Beginning of the year, I didn't have the answer. By the end of 2017, we have the answer. We are no longer going to tolerate the denigration, discrimination, and unjust treatment and sexual harassment of women, period. And so in the state of New York, we want to make sure that this is not reduced to a slogan or a one-off, or this is the year of the woman, but next year we're going to be back to the year of everybody else but the women, which I guess would be mostly men. We're going to do something about it. And here's what we're going to do with respect to this issue in the state workplace. First of all, we're going to do something that as you as taxpayers should find offensive. We're going to change this. Because right now, your hard-earned taxpayer dollars are used to pay off secret settlements because of lawsuits or cases brought by individuals subjected to sexual harassment by elected officials. Okay? That's got to be exposed. First of all, we want to know about these, but number one, you should not even be using taxpayer dollars. You do something wrong in your official capacity, you pay the settlement, not the taxpayers of the state of New York. No brainer. We're also going to make sure that we prohibit confidentiality agreements. We're also going to make sure that when businesses do business with the state of New York, think about this. It's very nice to get a state contract. But when you have the privilege of doing business with the state of New York, we want to make sure it is publicly disclose the cases of sexual harassment that are filed against you, because any young woman or man should be able to go into a workplace and know whether or not there's a culture of acceptance of this kind of behavior. Again, finding every way we can to shine a spotlight on this behavior in our efforts to make sure that it's gone forever. Roe v. Wade. Who would have thought that this would be something that is still not established in our nation? It is the law, but when I see what's coming out of Washington, I take nothing for granted. Nothing for granted. And we should no longer take the rights enshrined in Roe v. Wade for granted in the state of New York, and that is why we're going to work to make sure that it becomes part of our state law. We're going to continue working with the Governor's Council on Women and Girls and finding even more ways we can assist them. Let's talk about our kids. It's hard to believe that in 2018, we're talking about children in our communities, Brooklyn, who still go to school with their stomach growling in the morning because there was not enough food at home or no one gave them breakfast. And you know how you all get as adults. The hangries or hungries, whatever they call it, the Snickers bar commercial. Okay, think about how you are. How productive are you at the end of the day when you've been hungry? Think about starting your day as a little child, hungry throughout that entire day. The governor says this comes down to basic human decency. Let's make sure we have a program where we find every way to make sure kids have the nutrition, the food they need at the start of the day. There's some initiatives right there. But also using SUNY and CUNY campuses as a place to give the food to families that need that. Why not use our state-invested resources? Pre-K, incredible success story. We need to create even more openings for kids to have exposure to a better environment before they even get to school, because this will close the gap between what kids who grow up in areas of affluence get versus what they get in other areas. We can do that with expanding pre-K. Same thing with after-school programs. So many parents have to work while the kids are home after school. Whether they get into trouble or not, it's irrelevant, but that is a golden opportunity to help kids in tough areas, tough neighborhoods, to stay in the school environment. Get exposed to maybe some career counselors who come in when they're in high school, or some colleges to visit, get some extra tutoring, get some homework done. The rest of the world does this, when you think about it. Our kids are in competition with students being educated in places like China and Germany, and they have longer school days. In fact, they go to school year-round. I had a Chinese exchange student in high school, when she was in high school, came and lived with us, and could not figure out why my high school kids were home during the summer. It's like, wow, good question. I think it goes back to when we were an agrarian society, and we need these kids to help plant the seed and harvest at the end of summer. I kind of got embarrassed to say that's not really relevant anymore, is it? So let's reshift our focus and give every child not just a great education, but also understand their place in the global economy and invest in that. Lead exposure continues to be a huge problem to kids. Who would have thought we'd be talking about this now? But we're going to be investing, making sure that our public housing facilities are clean of this so we can protect our children. I'm in a medical facility, okay? I need to talk to you about the heroin opioid crisis, something that you're well familiar with, something that I believe has many reasons of why this is unprecedented. And I never thought that in 2018 I'd be standing before you and telling you that for the first time since 1950, the life expectancy of Americans has declined 2 years in a row. Think about that. When I was a kid, people were dying of lung cancer because everybody smoked. People were dying in car accidents because nobody had to wear a seatbelt. We didn't have all the innovations in healthcare that we have today. Our numbers should be showing a totally different story, but they're not. The number one killer of people 50 years old and under is now drug addiction. That's astounding to me. And I worked on this issue, as I said, a long time ago when it was crack cocaine, and we allocated money for New York City based on working with Senator Moynihan and others. But this is different. I believe that there'll always be in society people who turn to drugs and alcohol to deal with life. They will be there. We will take care of them. But what we have in addition to that are people who became accidental addicts because they are following a doctor's orders. And that's tough to say to a crowd that has medical professionals in it. But I'm all about reality. And I asked the head of the emergency room at my local hospital in Buffalo, why are you still prescribing opioid-based prescription drugs for almost everything that comes in the door when you know this could lead to a life of addiction? I said this when I was in Congress a few years ago. And they said everything we're trained to do in medical school is to get people out of pain. And this is a way to keep people out of pain. We listen to the pharmaceutical representatives. We understand this. It works. Well, then will someone explain to me why 98% of the opioid-based prescription drugs are consumed in America and not the rest of the world? I think there has been a strong influence from the pharmaceutical companies for profit motive, and I'm proud of the medical profession for recognizing this and proposing alternatives, but I need more. And I draw a close analogy between what I see here and what we had experienced with the tobacco companies, who knowingly put a product that they had tested and was addictive into the commercial place. People created addictions. It created a dependency on their product. Their profits went to the roof, and nobody stopped them. And how many thousands of people died because of their addiction to cigarettes? And they were sued by attorneys generals all across the state. And settlements came back to the states, and the money was used for prevention and education programs and try to help people who are sick. We're going to do the same with these drugs. We're going to challenge the pharmaceutical companies and say, you created a generation of people addicted to this. Because you should have said that after 14 days, the brain chemistry changes and you can have addiction. Why would you say that you should have 30 days for my kids who had their wisdom teeth taken out? 30 days of hydrocodone they gave my son and daughter at age 15 and 16. I happen to have already seen a number of deaths by then. This is a decade ago. I told them, you take Tylenol and suck it up, okay? But not every parent knew that. They all thought they're following a doctor's orders or a dentist's orders. Why would you challenge that? Why would the doctors challenge that? They hadn't seen anything like this before. I traveled the state as co-chair of the governor's task force, and I hugged way too many parents whose kids just followed the orders of a doctor, whether it was a high school shoulder injury for the quarterback of the football team, or my own sister-in-law, who we lost my nephew because he had an injury when he worked at a deli in high school and became addicted, and we lost him a couple years ago. And he was trying to turn his life around. He was actually a graduate student at the University of Buffalo trying to turn his life around, but the fentanyl-laced heroin, which is even more potent than ever before, stole him from us. I don't want to have these conversations anymore, anywhere in the state of New York. We have to be bold. We have to be aggressive. And I'm looking to the leaders here, Dr. Riley, and others who are in this profession to help us turn this around. We have no choice. We have no choice. And so we're going to go after these pharmaceuticals. We're going to talk about how much can be prescribed, alternative pain medication, what we can do to get through this crisis together. I talked a little bit about education and higher education. Here's the challenge of what we're talking about. We're telling everybody you have to get a college education for the jobs of today and tomorrow, okay? That's a given. You have to get this. At the same time, college has never been more expensive, okay? 34% of millennials are still living at home, no fault of their own, because they're consumed with debt. And now student loan debt has exceeded credit card debt as number one after the mortgage in our country. Okay, let's give these kids a break. First of all, with the Excelsior scholarship, hopefully their costs will be down going forward. We're going to help them. Secondly, we need an ombudsman. We need someone out there protecting young people so they know what they're getting into. Someone who does a calculation, who says, this is how much you'll be paying. You need to know this. And let them have, and they and their parents understand what this is going to look like, because we now have $1.48 trillion total debt. I remember talking about it when it was hit 1 trillion. I said, this can't possibly go higher. This is strangling our future leaders right now, and that's not fair. This one will drive you nuts. Right now, if you are licensed by the state of New York, any professional who has a license, and you fall behind on your student loan payment, they will withdraw your license. Yeah, you realize how crazy that is? How are you going to make the next payment if you don't have a job? So we're going to say no. We're more rational than that, and we're going to make sure that that law changes. We're going to continue the Excelsior program. We're going to add more money, make sure it's accessible to more people at a higher income. We've got 2 more topics I want to go through quickly. Ethics reform. Got a little work to do, don't we, folks? First of all, as hopefully voters, I thank you for voting for the constitutional amendment, which said that if you violate the public's trust, you should not collect a pension. That was required. The governor had been championing that for a long time. That is now the law of the land in the state of New York. Good job there. But the governor also says there are inherent conflicts of interest when you are an assembly member or a senator and you also have another job. Think about it. You're an attorney, you're in real estate, you're in insurance. How do you serve 2 masters? I think they should get paid more for what they do and work full time for us. Work for the people who elected them and not divide their loyalties, because we believe that having outside income creates a possibility of conflict. That's something we can change. I'm going to wrap up on something that is really critically important. First of all, are you aware that New York State ranks 41st in the nation in terms of voter participation? That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So you have to say, why aren't people voting in the state of New York? Okay? When you think about, especially women, remember how hard it was to get that right to vote 100 years ago? And I think we don't need to go too far back in history, November 16, to know that elections have severe consequences, right? So let's examine the challenge here. When we're talking about why the school day is a certain length and why kids go to school, there's just certain things that have always been that way. Why is it one day in November that people have allocated to elect their leaders? What's so magical about this time frame between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. on the first Tuesday of the month? Can we be like other states and say, yes, the people of New York can actually handle early voting. They're smart enough. Give them the opportunity to make it more flexible, fit into their own schedule. And like my dad in Florida, he likes to vote 10 to 12 days early to make sure he doesn't forget. That's a good thing. We need his vote in Florida, okay? It's an important state. So let's peel that back and say earlier voting Find out if people can vote with no fault absentee ballots. Find out if we can have them register the same day. Why not open up the process so people feel engaged? Because the reality is, especially with how long it takes people to get around in the state of New York, whether you're on Long Island or Brooklyn or elsewhere, you may have 2 hours commuting to work. Then you're going to work all day. Then you got to stop and see your parents and take care of them. Maybe see grandma in the nursing home. By the time you get home, it may be past 9 o'clock at night. You may have intended to vote, but life got in the way. Let's recognize the family pressures that are out there, the challenges that people have in this day and age, and say it is important enough to open the door, access to the ballot box, to make sure that every single person has a voice in our elections. And I hope they step up to that. I hope they step up. I'm old enough to remember when 18-year-olds got the right to vote. They were being drafted and sent to Vietnam, but couldn't buy a beer or vote, okay? So that was a societal shift. I remember that. But I hope that people will take advantage of this opportunity and know that what happens on Election Day has serious consequences. And that's all I'm going to say about Washington and our presidency anymore. We will make it easier. Very last point, and this is scary. Social media has revolutionized our elections, statement of fact. But did you know that last year 126 million Americans were exposed to social media ads on Facebook paid for by Russian agents? That should send chills up your spine. Now, most of us recognize this is a fact. Some people will come around to the realization that this is exactly what occurred in the presidential election in 2016. But it's not going to stop there. It'll have an impact on our next elections this November for Senate and for Congress. And at the state level, it could have an impact on our race for governor. It could have an impact on local races, city council races. Who knows where this will go, but to think that foreign agents had a direct impact by to people unwittingly open up these ads and not knowing the source of where it came from, that is an assault on our democracy. So when you think about the political ads you see today, television, radio, print, it always says paid for by, right? What's the difference with social media ads? Why can't we, as consumers of this information, know who paid for that ad? Now, I'm not saying you're going to see paid for by the Kremlin anytime soon. They will still be very clever, I'm sure. But again, you never go wrong when you put the spotlight on an issue and let people know they may be being misled by foreign agents who want to subvert our democracy. Okay? I think that's important to get out there. And so we'll make it available to journalists as well. We'll create a repository and say, here's a list of who paid for every ad, or a political opponent wants to find out who's paying for this advertising. We need to know. I told you it's almost done. I'm really promising to be out here in 2 minutes. New York City, I'm proud of New Yorkers because we don't obsess about this. We deal with life. We deal with the challenges, but we also know that as the greatest city on this planet, we'll always be a target. So the governor's going to continue understanding this challenge and putting money behind making sure we have the strongest counterterrorism program in the nation. But we'll also not lose our soul over this. We're also going to let people know that we are still a compassionate society, and we will continue to invest money into taking care of the homeless, who I guarantee if you interview a homeless person, they do not want to be in that situation. These are still God's children, and we should not be stepping over them on a sidewalk because of their mental health issues or their addiction or whatever job loss brought them to that state. And so we're going to continue investing in affordable housing wherever and whenever we can. We're going to make that commitment. And just to have a little fun at the end of our remarks here, another park for you to play in. Brooklyn has done a magnificent job transforming its waterfront. I've walked there, I've embraced it. I love what you're doing here. To see families and individuals at place at former brownfields and industrial sites, now incredible venues near the water. We're going to continue with the largest state park in New York City 407 acres will be open in Jamaica Bay, so that'll be fun. I look forward to that ribbon cutting. So, I talked about where we've come from, talked about the challenges. We will stay the course, but the good news is we are New Yorkers. And we say, bring it on. We will be up for any of these challenges. We say, bring it on, and with your help and your influence as community leaders and thought leaders, you now have information. I need you to use this, particularly on some of the agenda items, which are going to be tougher for us to get over the finish line. I need your support. Indeed, the state of New York needs your support. So thank you very much. Let's keep it going. Appreciate it. Thank you.